There may be no greater, growing threat facing the world's children and their children than climate change. So declared UNICEF Executive Director Anthony Lake, shown in the foreword to the newly released UNICEF report, Unless We Act Now, the Impact of Climate Change on Children. As escalating droughts and flooding degrade food production, children will bear the greatest burden of hunger and malnutrition, the UNICEF chief continues. As temperatures increase, together with water scarcity and air pollution, children will feel the deadliest impact of water-borne diseases and dangerous respiratory conditions. As more extreme weather events expand the number of emergencies and humanitarian crises, children will pay the highest price. As the world experiences a steady rise in climate-driven migration, children's lives and futures will be the most disrupted. These are the threats that children face today. Let us pause for a few corrections, because Anthony Lake, a radical leftist and notorious security risk, is too fast and furious at piling on ludicrous fallacies, many of which are so far from real science that they've been disavowed even by many of the usual alarmists. Let us start with the drought claim, which has been one of the most abused issues of late, capitalizing on the California drought and other normally occurring droughts. Back in February, when President Obama and his entourage were touring drought-stricken California, they made repeated claims that this is what is in store for the rest of the country if we don't stop climate change. Even the New York Times, one of the staunchest voices in the global warming alarm choir, felt compelled to report that in doing so, Obama and company were pushing at the boundaries of scientific knowledge about the relationship between climate change and drought. Moreover, said the Times, there is no scientific consensus yet that drought is a worldwide phenomenon. Nor is there definitive evidence that global warming is causing California's problems. In fact, reported the Times, the most recent computer projections suggest that as the world warms, California should get wetter, not drier, in the winter, when the state gets the bulk of its precipitation. That has prompted some of the leading experts to suggest that climate change most likely had little role in causing the drought. The Times quoted Obama's science czar John P. Holdren, a rabid warmist, who admitted, scientifically, no single episode of extreme weather, no storm, no flood, no drought can be said to have been caused by global climate change. For more on drought, see here. For information refuting the extreme weather and more and bigger floods, hurricanes, tornadoes, etc. see here, here, here and here. But UNICEF will continue to push the UN's global warming propaganda line, regardless of the evidence to the contrary. Unless we act forcefully to stem the climate crisis now, the danger will only escalate, Lake warns. It is a prospect so painful to imagine that many people would rather not think about it. Lake continues the melodrama. We have an opportunity to tackle this crisis before it is too late. That means taking decisive action to cut greenhouse gas emissions in order to slow and ultimately stop the advance of climate change. No human responsibility runs deeper than the charge of every generation to care for the generation that follows it. For current and future generations of children, and for us all, the stakes could not be higher. Aside from the inconvenient fact that no measurable global warming has occurred for the last 19 years, a fact admitted even by the UNICEF and many top alarmists, see here, here and here, it is the alarmists' energy shackling proposals, not climate change, that are the real threat to the children of the world and future generations, as former APEC member in Diogclany, John Lomborg, and many other climate policy experts have shown. Allowing UN agencies and national and state governments to confiscate trillions of dollars and impose draconian regulatory controls on everyone and everything, for the alleged purpose of saving the world from a non-existent threat, will condemn all the world's children, except for those of the ruling oligarchs, of course, to a life grinding poverty and deprivation as well as the loss of liberty. UNICEF calls for transforming your children into climate change agents. The November 24 press notice announcing the release of UNICEF's report, "Unless we act now," warns ominously, more than 500 million children live in areas with extremely high flood occurrence and 160 million in high drought severity zones, leaving them highly exposed to the impacts of climate change. It is no secret that the report's release was timed to aid the UN's Paris Climate Summit. World leaders gathering in Paris for COP21 held from November 30 to December 11 will seek to reach agreement on cutting greenhouse gas emissions, which most experts say is critical to limiting potentially catastrophic rises in temperature, the UNICEF press release says. "We know what has to be done to prevent the devastation climate change can inflict. Failing to act would be unconscionable," said Anthony Lake. "We owe it to our children and to the planet to make the right decisions at COP21." So, what do Lake and UNICEF plan to do to prevent the devastation climate change can inflict? According to their new report, "Unless we act now," page 9, under the heading, "Now is the time for action," a key objective is providing children and youth with climate change education, awareness raising and training. Yes, still more climate change education, awareness raising and training, as if they haven't already been sufficiently immersed, marinated, and steeped in, and traumatized by, climate alarmism. As we reported during the UN's COP18 Climate Summit in Doha, Qatar, in 2012, top UNICEF official Stephanie Hodge introduced at the conference a new education resource manual that she said would help transform your children into climate change agents. Yes, underneath all of the UNICEF pleas to save the children is a covert, insidious agenda to use, exploit, and brainwash your children into becoming pliant, militant climate change agents. Need proof that it is already underway? See our story on 13-year-old Hallie Turner, who is suing the state of North Carolina because it refuses to implement the global warming policies she demands. She is one of hundreds of young activists, Earth Guardians, who are bringing lawsuits against all 50 states of the United States, as well as the federal government to stop the threat of global warming. It should be no surprise then to learn that these climate change agents, according to the Earth Guardian website, are partners with UNICEF, and UNICEF admits to helping produce their propaganda videos aimed at recruiting more change agents among children and youth. Precisely how much money, your tax dollars, Anthony Lake's UNICEF has poured into the Earth Guardians is unclear, since neither organization provides that information on their websites, and UNICEF has been notorious for refusing to divulge where millions of unaccounted for funds have flown